So we have a very exciting episode of Why Did You Read That this week that I think a lot of people are looking forward to if they listen to our last poetry episode,
The highly anticipated
Ice Planet
bringing forth of
Barbarians.
Ice Planet Barbarians.
Very exciting.
I was tempted to not even bring 4 titles and just be like, I don't care what you want to talk about because I'm talking about Ice
I
Planet
mean,
Barbarians.
let's be real. What other title am I picking?
Yeah, well, that was the other thing is that I was like, well, maybe if I'm bringing 4, maybe I should bring 3 throwaways because I'm like, I'm not going to talk about at least 2 of them.
Anyway, this is the podcast. Why did you read that?
Yeah,
Yeah, and I'm Megan,
I'm Peter.
and we get together once a month and we talk about stuff that we're reading. And I bring 4 titles, and Peter picks 2 that he wants to hear about. And Peter brings 4 titles, and I pick Ice Planet Barbarians and another one,
Yep.
and we talk about it.
I'm trying to decide if we should save how we should place Ice Planet Barbarians to force. I should have brought something that I'm like, nobody's going to want to read this, but I want to talk about it. So I need to, I'd be like, okay, X-Men Operation Zero Tolerance Saga, Ooh, the Avengers Korvac quest that nobody's going to want to hear about. And then that way I could talk about it and force people to listen to it.
Is this like the grocery store thing where they put the milk in the back?
Exactly.
So that you have to walk past, all of the, the candy and the chips.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, if I owned a grocery store, I think I'd be looking to swap that idea. I'd be like, everybody's going for the Oreos. Like the milk.
Oh.
I don't know about the milk.
Put the Oreos in the back.
Yeah.
Make everyone pass the breakfast cereals.
Yeah. Yep. I just saw a thing about a breakfast cereal that's meant to be eaten with orange juice instead of milk. Like they
Ew.
designed the flavor to be good with orange juice.
That doesn't seem right.
I'm curious what it tastes like, but not so curious that I bought it, but I'm curious.
See, I was going to say this could be your assignment, your mission, Peter, should you choose to accept it. Let's try this cereal with orange juice.
Well, if anyone from that company is listening and wants to sponsor an episode of the podcast by sending me the cereal, I'll provide the orange juice. Maybe I'll try some different orange juices, some Sunny D, some orange Gatorade, see what works.
The real stuff versus your orange crush, maybe a little orange crush just to see.
I don't
How
know.
does carbonation affect the whole situation?
Oh, yeah. I don't know what's in Sunny D, but I would be afraid that it would cause a chemical reaction of some kind.
Well, this is the science of it all.
Come in with no eyebrows, and I'm like, so the cereal. All right, well, so you have to do a joke.
I do. And I have a joke that I quite enjoy. I ran this past my office mate, and she laughed a lot, so fingers crossed.
Okay.
So I went to my friend's house, and he was showing me his tool shed, showing me all the stuff in there and how he had it organized. And he points to a ladder. That's my step ladder. He said, I never knew my real ladder. Step ladder.
Oh, no. No, 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 no.
Yes.
I had a look of bewilderment
You
for a
did.
second because I was like, wait, what?
This is my step ladder. I never knew my real ladder.
I got it.
Yeah.
I'm with you. My step ladder. I think I got lost in the joke because I was picturing you going to someone's house and they're showing you a tool shed. And
You
I
think
just
too much about these.
I just pictured you in real life doing this, and you would be standing there going like, what are we doing? Like,
Yeah,
why are
that's
you
true.
showing me this?
It's not my scene.
Tool sheds?
Tool sheds in general, yeah, not really.
This old house, YouTube's
yeah.
channel.
I mean, I think the closest I've gotten to this old house existence is I hung up vertical blinds at my mother's house once.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I was pretty proud of myself. And I can put together IKEA furniture like nobody's business.
Well, there you go.
So,
Do you
That's as
use
close
the
as I got.
included tools or do you BYO tools to the IKEA game?
I mean, it depends. I will say I have my own set of hex wrenches.
Oh, see, there you go.
Yeah, they were a housewarming gift.
All right,
All right, you ready to hear some titles?
I'm ready.
All right, so I had kind of a slow reading month this month. So I have 3 graphic novels.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Okay.
The first one I actually heard from you on this podcast.
Okay.
It's called Ghosted Haunted Heist. We talked
Ghosted
about
Haunted
this.
Heist.
Hmm?
I don't even remember, but
Haunted
okay.
Heist. You mentioned it somehow. It was about it's a group of people who are going into a haunted house to steal a ghost.
Okay.
You don't remember this?
No.
Wow. Well, then I found it on my own through my supreme book finding skills.
Don't you wish you were as smart as me?
My second book is Isla to Island by Alexis Castellanos. This is like an elementary level picture. It's like wordless graphic novel mostly, but I think that it has appeal for a lot of ages. I really enjoyed it.
Isla to Island? Like the
Isla
name?
to Island. Isla like the name.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's set in 1960s Cuba, and it's kind of focused on a real thing that was Operation Peter Pan. So as Castro was coming into power, a lot of people were afraid that their children were going to be taken and put in re-education homes, and like that there was going to be, violence in the revolution and all of this stuff. So a bunch of children were sent to the United States. So for safety, basically.
Okay.
So it's a story about one of these girls who was sent to New York City by her parents.
Is this a true story or is this like a...
A fictionalized story of a real thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Then I have Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. This
Okay.
is based on a webcomic that I think is already done. This is just like the first print edition of I think the first 25 seasons. I'm not sure what she calls them. And it is a fantasy romance centering on the Hades and Persephone story, which
okay.
it's a thing for me.
Come
I
back
realize
around,
that
yeah.
I'm predictable. Don't judge me. And then the last one is for a book that is not out until July. I read it because I'm special like that.
Okay, I see.
But I didn't have a whole lot to talk about, and so even though it's not out yet, I thought I'm going to include it in my options anyway. It's called What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. We talked about T. Kingfisher actually in our very first episode.
Okay.
The Hollow Places.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. And I'm a big fan. So this one is coming out in July, and I wanted to read it. It's basically T. Kingfisher's retelling of The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think I want to hear about this ghost thing.
The haunted heist?
The haunted heist.
Okay.
I feel like I don't remember this at all. So
I don't
now
know how
I'm
that's
like,
possible.
I don't either. Well, it's possible. I read a lot of comics, and sometimes they kind of blur together.
Yeah?
I do the same thing with books. One time I was reading Kurt Vonnegut's Sirens of Titan, and I'm not going to spoil the ending of the book, but it has an incredibly bizarre and it's totally an unpredictable ending, right? Like you could never guess where it's going. And I remember I was reading it, and then I was like, I have an idea of what's going to happen. And then that's what happened. And that it wasn't until I was reading final pages that I was like, I've read this before. And not that long ago.
Yeah.
And so I was reading it and finishing it, and it has this bizarre ending. And then I was like, well, I guess on the plus you got to experience this twice, which is kind of nice. But it would be nice to remember some of what you read.
Yeah. I have to admit I've had that experience with the occasional romance novel where I read the plot and I'm like, that sounds like something I would love. And I start reading it and I have this moment of, this feels very familiar. I feel like I've been here before.
Yeah. Okay, so
Ghosted.
Haunted Heist.
Volume
Ghosted.
1, Haunted Heist by Joshua Williamson.
Okay.
So it opens up with the main character, Jackson T. Winters, and he is in jail. He's like a con man, a thief, and his last job went south, and the rest of his team died. So he was the only survivor.
That's
and now he's in jail.
Pretty bad outcome for
Yeah.
the last job.
Yeah, didn't go well. I think we're safe to say it wasn't the preferred outcome.
Yeah.
And I think he has a little bit of survivor's guilt over the whole thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So he's in prison, and this enormous riot breaks out one night. And it turns out that this riot is basically cover for this heavily armed woman with a severe blonde bob haircut who shows up in his cell and breaks him out of prison and drugs him. And he wakes up in her very eccentric rich boss's house.
Okay.
So eccentric, old rich guy trademark. He's sitting behind his enormous desk, and Jackson is tied up to a chair or whatever. And the old rich guy has this huge collection of creepy paranormal items and, like voodoo dolls and shrunken heads and all the weird stuff, Ouija
Gotcha.
boards and stuff. And he has a deal for Jackson. He says there's this huge mansion that belonged to the Trask family, and it's rumored to be hugely haunted, like mega haunted, the most
Gotcha.
haunted place ever. And it's due to be demolished. And before it gets demolished, he wants Jackson to go in and steal him a ghost. And if he can do this, exactly. I have a box, stuff it in.
Yeah.
He says, if you can do this, then I'll use all my money and my influence to get you out of prison for permanent and whisk you away to a private island where you will live out the rest of your life in luxury.
All right.
So, not much of a choice there. Go back to prison in the middle of this riot, or try to kidnap a ghost and maybe live out the rest of your life in luxury.
I was about to say this eccentric millionaire should have made a lower ball offer, because I was prepared to take it for just like, I'll use all my power and resources to get you out of prison. I'd be like, all right, done.
Sounds good.
And then he's like, oh, you don't want the island or whatever? I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have agreed before you were done. I
Yeah.
didn't know that was a comma, not a period.
Always pause, see if there's more. So Jackson assembles his crew. They're going to go into this abandoned mansion and steal the ghost. He's got the heavily armed blonde woman who's basically like security and also keeping an eye on him for the old rich guy. You've got a psychic medium who was handpicked by the old rich guy. You've got these two internet ghost hunters. They have like their ghost hunting channel.
Yep.
Have you seen those on YouTube?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so it's exactly what you're imagining.
Your Zach Baggins type.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're going to go in and set up all their cameras and record everything and like do their ghost hunting thing. And then he has a professional skeptic who like makes all of his money debunking claims of the paranormal.
Your Agent Scully type.
Exactly.
Okay.
And they're going to go in and they're going to, do the business. So then you get into the house. There's all these haunted house like hijinks, exactly what you want, like wispy ghosts, whatever. Like their deal is that they're out of the house by dark, no questions asked, because nobody survives if you stay after dark. But the psychic medium keeps pushing, like, I would be so much easier to like reach the spirits if we were here after dark. So it's a lot of what you're expecting, but there are some secrets also in like why Marcus wants this ghost and why he picked Jackson to get it. And there's a twist in the ending as well.
Gotcha.
So pretty
sounds
fun.
cool.
It's like nothing spectacularly amazing, but if you're looking for some good old haunted house scares, I think it fits the bill.
I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you take that deal?
I mean, I feel like if I were in jail, I would kind of have to.
Yeah, let's put aside the jail part. Let's say you're just you, and they're like, okay, we need a librarian to go, because it's a haunted library. I don't know. We need you for some reason.
Reasons.
Yeah. I always like to imagine, I'm like, why would the government come to me and be like, get me Peter? Like, what would be the job that But anyway, you're just you, and they're like, you can live your life out in luxury on a private island if you do this. Would you do it?
And it's a haunted house, and
Yeah.
I'm like stealing a ghost.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm a weird combination of very practical, and I don't think I actually believe in ghosts, but I also get very scared by the idea of them.
Yeah. I don't think they're real, and they're terrifying.
Yeah. Like So when I watch these like ghost YouTube videos of ghost hunting stuff,
Sure.
and I don't find it particularly frightening because I always see like some other explanation for what's going on. Not
Yeah.
always, but usually.
Yeah.
And there's no other explanation, it's usually that they're faking it
Right.
for me.
Right.
But then when I watch like creepy horror movies, they're very frightening. Like hauntings are the ones that scare me the most.
Huh.
So I don't know how to explain it, but I think I'm easily impressionable about stuff like that. So my practical mind would be like, this is a lie, but my lizard brain would be like, run away.
Yeah.
So I kind of think I probably wouldn't.
All right.
If I didn't have to. If I weren't in jail, I think I'd be like, I'm good.
So, like, if you got the classic Scooby-Doo deal of, like, stay in this haunted mansion for one night for
Yeah.
$1 million, you might not do it.
I might not. I
Oof.
might because I can sleep through anything. Like, I'm a really good sleeper.
There's ghosts everywhere,
And
but
as
you're
long
just
as I'm able
asleep
to
the whole
get to
time.
sleep before anything that is potentially scary happens, I'll be fine.
See, this is why they would come to you, because they're like, we need someone who's really good at sleeping
Oh, I'm
through
amazing
stuff.
at sleeping. I can sleep through anything. As you know, I'm deaf on one side, so I just sleep on my good ear, and like a train could come through the room and I wouldn't know.
That's pretty awesome.
It's great. There are benefits.
Yeah. I mean, my problem is I would pretty much do anything for anything. As far as, if they're like, ooh, stay in this haunted house, I would probably do it for free just because I'd be like, well, one of two things is going to happen. Nothing will happen.
Right.
And then
And you get all the benefits.
Yeah. Or B, something will happen, but then I will have confirmed for myself that ghosts are real. And, like, then it's a whole new world. Who knows?
Yeah, but is it a good one?
No.
No.
But is it ever? Does learning
Yeah,
things
I mean-
ever help?
As things stand, if I hear a bump in my house, I'm like, oh, house is settling. But when I have confirmation that ghosts exist, well, it's definitely a ghost out for my blood.
Yeah. Yeah. That would make it worse in that way. I don't know. Just be a more interesting life, though. To me.
Well, there's that old curse. May you live in interesting times.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm just bored. So that's why I would go see ghosts.
I guess so. Well, there you go.
All right. Excellent. All right, so I'll tell you my 4 books.
All right. I mean 3, really,
yeah,
right?
I could tell you the 3, and then one of them is The 90s by Chuck Klosterman.
Oh, okay. I knew you would probably end up reading that.
One of my faves. Another one is a comic called Steeple by John Allison. That is, well, okay, so The 90s, is basically a bunch of, I guess, short essays and creative nonfiction about the decade of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Steeple is about it's a comedic graphic novel where a lady who's part of the Catholic Church goes to this small town to work with a priest who turns out to be sort of a two-fisted monster fighting priest.
Ooh.
And then there's sort of a like evil church there as well. And so the two churches kind of clash, but it's mostly funny
Okay.
as opposed to being like,
Scary.
yeah.
Okay.
Then there's The Cape by Joe Hill, which is also a comic about a guy who kind of discovers he has the power of light.
Okay.
It's dark and scarier.
Okay.
And then my 4th book is, of course, Ulysses by James Joyce.
Curses.
No, it's Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon, which
All
is
right.
about Ice Planet Barbarians
I mean, it's right there in the
and
title.
the women who love them.
All right. Well, in the interests of putting the milk at the back of the store,
Uh-huh.
I'm going to pick one of your first 3.
Okay.
And I think I would like to hear about the 90s because this is like, I'm kind of a child of the 90s. Like I was in like late high school, early college in the 90s. So like all of the fun stuff was happening in that time for me.
Yeah.
So, and it's something I've thought about reading. I've read Chuck Klosterman before. So I would like to hear how this went for you.
It's really good.
Okay.
It gives you a lot of different things to think about as far as looking at the 90s. So I think the sort of classic way that people write about a book about like a decade or a company or something is like a re-examination of the time. So
Mm-hmm.
they go back and they're like, "Ooh, we all thought Nirvana was the biggest band, but it was really Pearl Jam," something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And that ended up not being his goal with the book. He
Okay.
was kind of it was almost like he was talking about the 90s as being sort of a bizarre time because things that were normal in the 90s would not seem normal now. And then he was also kind of talking about how maybe the 90s will be the last decade. Like
Hmm.
that'll be the last time we think of as being a distinct decade that's different from other decades. And a lot of that has to do with technology and stuff. So for example, Chuck Klosterman was a rock critic for like a long time. So he talks about music pretty often. And he gets asked a lot of times like when was the best time for music? Like
Mm-hmm.
when did music start to be horrible or, some version of that? And he's always kind of like, well, really, the modern time is always the best time for music because the old music doesn't go away anymore. Like it used to be, there'd be a bunch of bands in the 70s or something that maybe would put out an album, but then didn't go anywhere. You'd never see it in the record store or whatever. And that continued up through the 90s, but then when the internet era came about and now on like Spotify or whatever, you can just find anything, you know. So he's kind of like immune to the argument that like music's no good anymore because he's like, well, all the old music still exists and you can just listen to that. Probably one of the most interesting parts of the book was when he talks about cell phones and
Mm-hmm.
smartphones because basically, most people now I think or feel that we're sort of subject to the whims of our phones and we're like
Yeah.
always on our phones and it's kind of an inconvenience. But his main idea was that they're actually incredibly convenient and that we used to be more devoted to our house phones
Mm.
because he was like, well, if someone was going to call you, you just kind of had to wait around
Yeah.
until they called.
Yeah. You were chained to your house.
Yeah, and then if you made plans with somebody, you basically would make plans on Tuesday, let's say, for Friday, and then he's like, and then you would just go and hope that everything went according to plan for both of you.
Yeah.
And you would arrive at the place you were supposed to arrive at the time you were supposed to arrive,
Yeah.
and nothing had changed between now and then, and blah blah blah.
Yeah. I was listening to a podcast that was talking about how back in these days, as a kid, you could not be found until you went home. Like if you were out of your house doing something, playing around in the park or whatever, like you were you were off the grid until you showed up back home.
Right.
Like, and I
Yeah.
thought about it. I was like, it's true. We really were running wild.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's some of that in there. That seems to be one of the bigger changes between the 90s and now. I don't know. It's just an interesting book to read. He profiles like Bill Clinton because he was like the president during a lot of the 90s
Yep.
and sort of how Bill Clinton's legacy has gotten much much worse over more recent history and how his kind of premise with that is he's like nobody from modern times and probably times moving forward will ever understand how Bill Clinton was that like publicly approved with his affair and Monica
Yeah.
Lewinsky scandal and all that. Like that's not going to make sense to anybody ever. And kind of along with that, he talks about how in the 90s it was a lot more normal to be a person who basically is not engaged with politics and is like you usually vote but you don't really talk about or think about politics that much and how now that's become weird.
Yeah.
Like it would be weird to meet someone who doesn't have a strong opinion on politics
Yeah.
now.
Maybe too strong an opinion.
Yeah. And so it seems like he's proposing that there are some pluses and minuses to
Hmm.
that. As far as like, it used to be easier to get along with someone that you maybe had a fundamental disagreement with,
Hmm.
but things can change in a positive way too.
Yeah.
What I really like about the book though is, and what some people will not like about the book, it doesn't I don't think it's trying to change your mind about things, or it kind of asks questions more than it proposes answers to those
Okay.
questions. So it just brings up sort of interesting ideas about the 90s and interesting ideas about what the difference is between the 90s and now, but without sort of saying like, and therefore, we're better now, we're worse now, we're this, we're that. And so I've seen a lot of mixture of some critics don't like that.
Yeah.
I think that's a less popular style of writing nonfiction now.
Mm-hmm.
And some critics like it. So I think that's been a huge mix in the reception of it. And that's probably the biggest caution I'd give to reading it.
I feel like that's relatively standard for Chuck Klosterman, though.
Yes.
He's more of an ideas guy than an answers guy.
Absolutely. I mean, one of his books, the title of it is literally a question, but what if we're wrong? And the entire book is trying to sort of push the premise of, is it possible that we are wrong about things? And yeah, his last one before this was a series of short stories that were kind of all based on hypothetical questions and didn't really answer the question, so I think some people find that frustrating, or some people find it like self-indulgent maybe, because he's just kind of musing about things.
Yeah.
But I find it super interesting. I think he is just an interesting thinker.
Yeah.
Like taking a tour inside his mind. I don't know if I'd want to live inside his mind, but it's a great place to visit. And then the last thing I wanted to say about the book too is he was talking about how he really enjoyed writing it because he wrote it during like a lot of the lockdowns and over the last couple of years of pandemic. And so he was like, for me, I would wake up in the morning and go work on it. And so for like 2 to 4 hours every day, I was sort of escaping into the 90s, which was more enjoyable than 2020
for so many reasons.
For him and probably a lot of other people. So it did, and it does feel like that when you're reading it too, though. It's like you get to think about some things from the 90s, and it's not like it's all just fluffy or whatever.
Right.
But I think it's easier to look at things from the 90s in a more like just a philosophical way, as opposed to like, oh, this is hurting people right now, or this is doing this right now. It's a little easier to examine.
Right.
So I had a lot of fun with it. It's a good audiobook if you do audiobooks too. He reads it, which I prefer. He doesn't like his own voice, but
do any of us like our own voices?
No, nobody does.
No.
What
it
you
sounds
hear on
different
this,
in your head.
Yeah. Well, what you hear on this podcast, I completely edit it, so that's not what I sound like in real life. I sound much better in real life. You don't have to laugh at that.
No comment.
So anyway, I don't know if that was a great pitch for the 90s, but I recommend it. And like if you're thinking about it, just pick it up and you can like kind of read any of the different sections, the different chapters.
That's the great thing about essays.
Yeah. And they all kind of work alone. So you can kind of just read each one alone and see if it works for you or not. But I'd go for it.
Cool.
Boom.
Excellent.
Look at us plowing through these.
Yeah. Do you need a reminder?
Okay, let me see if I can remember. I know which one I wanted to hear about. It was also a haunted one or a scary one.
Oh, was it What Moves the Dead?
It was What Moves the Dead.
The T. Kingfisher novel?
Yes.
All right. So this will be out on July 12th, but I will say that it is already in the library catalog, so you can stake your claim now and get on the list early if it's something that you're interested in. So really, I'm doing this for everyone else, not for
you.
myself.
Oh.
I'm being selfless here by talking about a book I got to read early.
I can't figure out if this is like a humble brag situation or like what's going on.
I'm trying to assuage my guilt.
Oh, I see.
For picking a book that people can't read right away.
Because you got to read it first?
Yeah, because I got to read it early, yeah.
Well.
I feel a little bad.
But that's why you get to read it early, right? So you can tell everyone about it, and then they can get on the ball and read it.
Yeah, but I mean, they can't get on the ball and read it until July.
You know what? I blame everyone listening to this. If
Wow.
they'd gone to library school, if they'd
Wow.
signed up for this reading list thing, if they'd done all this work that you'd done, guess what? You could read a book like 2 months early too.
I feel
Maybe you
like
should have thought of that before you became a billionaire accountant or whatever.
I'm not following down this path, listeners. I remain sorry for tantalizing you with a book you can't get yet.
And I remain aggressively adamant that you should have done this instead of, I don't know, whatever you're doing.
I feel like I need to take a moment to address the potential sing-song in the back of the audio here. For
There's-
anyone who's hearing it, we are in a room that is very near the children's room at the library, and there is a puppet theater outside the door.
Oh,
And so if anyone's hearing a very exciting, drama happening, that is most likely the puppet theater in the children's room.
I see. I
So.
see.
Yeah.
Well, that gives me a good idea if we ever do this as a live version. You know how some podcasts will do a live show?
Mm-hmm.
We could do a puppet theater show. And then we don't have to actually be on stage.
Oh, see, I like that.
I thought you might.
Yeah. All right.
We
Now-
do have
yeah,
to be
there we
just
go.
cramped under a table for like an hour. But
Well, you saw The Sound of Music. They had just the giant one with like the marionettes that you could stand.
I did see The Sound of Music.
We just need to get fancy with it.
We had to watch that every year in elementary
I've
school.
seen it so many times.
Our elementary school music teacher, I went to a school that didn't have a lot of money which I knew later because the way we learned about musical instruments was she showed us pictures of them.
Ooh, yeah.
This is a trombone. This is a trumpet. And she had these. But anyway, we watched 2 movies every year that she insisted on. One was The Sound of Music, and the other was John Tesh Live at Red Rocks.
Oh,
She was the hugest fan of John Tesh. She thought he was so talented.
yikes.
And I didn't care for it. But I was in 4th grade, so I don't think I was meant to.
Sure.
I don't think I'm a John Tesh audience.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think you're right about that.
So maybe he is really talented. I don't know.
Yeah. When I was young, we saw The Sound of Music and Fiddler on the Roof a lot. So
Oh, yeah.
while they're both quality musicals and classics in their own right, I don't watch them very much because I have been burned out, but good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see
Anyway.
that. Anyway,
Anyway, back off the tangent, reining us in.
back to the dead.
Back to the dead. What moves the dead? So T. Kingfisher did write that book that is from episode 1 called The Hollow Places, and it's super great. That one is most of her horror seems to be inspired by classic horror of some other kind. So that one was inspired by a short story called The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, and this one, What Moves the Dead, is inspired by The Fall of the House of Usher by Edgar Allan Poe. And just full disclosure, I have never read The Fall of the House of Usher.
All right.
So, and I still thought that this was wonderful. So you don't need to have read it in order to get a whole lot out of this book.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Yeah. So it's set in a kind of an imaginary world called Ruritania that basically is like England just after World War One,
Okay.
with some differences. So because they were fighting World War One, there was this desperate need for soldiers, and there were women who wanted to fight, but women can't join the army, right? So they created this new faction of the military that allowed women to join and fight under certain circumstances, and if they abandoned female dress and female pronouns.
Okay.
So they basically, I'm going to use they pronouns. I can't remember if there's one that was designated specifically for this group in the book, but we're going to use they. So Alex Easton is one of these soldiers who joined the military and fought, and has just returned from the war and receives word that their friend Madeline Usher is dying. And so, the opening of the book is rushing to this crumbling estate to see her and her brother Roderick before she dies, basically.
Roderick is such a great,
Roderick.
old-timey, yeah. Oh, our manners, I don't know. That's just what it makes me think of.
It does have a certain highfalutingness to
Yeah,
it,
something.
Roderick.
Yeah.
So when they get to the grounds of the estate, everything seems a little bit weird. There's this creepy fungus everywhere, these weird mushrooms that don't seem like anything familiar. And there's a lake that sometimes glows in the dark next to the manor, and there are all of these rabbits on the land that act incredibly unnatural. They have this like jerking, like twitching walk kind of a
Ew.
thing,
Okay.
and they seem very alert about human activity, like more aware, and like they're paying attention to what humans are doing in a way that wild rabbits wouldn't.
Hmm.
And they also seem like not necessarily afraid. Like, like a rabbit might be watching you, and when you move towards them, they run away because they were watching to see if you were coming after them.
Right.
That does not seem to be the case with these rabbits. There's something weird about these rabbits, basically.
I would not like that. Okay.
Yeah, no, the rabbits are very creepy. They're actually on the cover of the book, and it's a really great illustration and also incredibly unsettling. So,
I'm picturing Bunnicula, but that's just.
yeah, no, it's nothing like Bunnicula.
I kind of thought it wasn't, but
When Alex gets there, he sees Madeline, who is incredibly thin, and like there's nothing left of her, and she's very weak, but she's still like, they find her wandering the house at all hours, and when they find her, she seems completely out of it. Like, it's almost like aphasia, like she's saying things but almost like she doesn't understand language anymore. She's using words in a weird way, and they think that she's sleepwalking, but it's very, very unsettling. The whole situation is weird and like creepy.
And this is the dying woman?
This is, Madeline,
Okay.
Madeline Usher, who is, who's dying, basically, or that's what they.
Or sort of, yeah.
Yeah.
Something is going on.
So yeah, and I don't really want to get too far past that because that gets into, first of all, it's a relatively slight book. Like there's not a whole lot to it. It's like almost like a long novella. But it's lots of atmosphere. So if you like a good Gothic story, something that's just swirling with atmosphere, that's what you're going to get in this one. It's creepy and insidious. Alex can feel that there's something wrong going on in this place, but not how to help or what it is exactly. And meanwhile, things just keep getting creepier, which is pretty great. Anyone who's read the book Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, I would say that this is going to be as a similarly satisfying read.
Okay. Sounds pretty excellent.
I really enjoyed it. T. Kingfisher, I think people who know her are like, yeah, T. Kingfisher, 100%. But I don't think enough people know who she is. Like,
Yeah.
once you know her, you know.
Yeah.
But more people need to know.
I see the names swirl around,
Yeah.
but not like.
Yeah. I think her day is, her sun is rising, maybe.
Yeah.
I think more people are starting to talk about her. More people are getting to know her, and which makes me happy because anyone who likes a scary story, it can be hard to find a real good quality scary story.
Yeah.
And she's given them, so that makes me happy.
I also kind of I feel that there is a newer trend of like scary stories not being as long.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of nice too, because you're like, all right, I can find out whether or not I like this without, and you pick up Stephen King's It, which I liked, but I was like, this is a commitment.
Investment.
Yeah. It's like, my arms are getting tired from holding this book.
I give a lot of credit to the publisher Tor and Tor.com because they are releasing a whole lot of novellas, and you can read most of them for free online if you wanted.
Yeah.
They give their ebooks without, with free copyright access. Like they don't, what is
DRM
it, Digital
free.
Millennium copyright stuff,
Yeah.
the DMCA stuff. They don't have any of that attached to their ebooks. And so many novellas, and they're taking a chance on, marginalized voices and weird stories and different perspectives, and all in like fantasy, sci-fi, and horror. And so yeah, check out the Tor Nightfire blog if you're looking for some good, novellas.
All right.
And they write about stuff that's not even Tor, so it's a great blog.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of rare for a publisher to be like,
Yeah,
hey,
they're
we'll
publisher
talk
neutral.
about another publisher because we like this book so much.
Yeah, big thumbs up to Tor. I'm a fan.
It always cracks me up. Like if you go, well, probably most people won't go to a library conference, but if you do, they'll have like a panel, and it's like, what's new in, young adult?
Mm-hmm.
And then they have a bunch of reps from different publishers, and I'm like, well, would you look at that? Your 10 favorite books coming from YA category are all from you. That's weird.
Yeah.
What a lucky year you've had publishing, that you're publishing the 10 best.
I will say, so I was lucky enough to go to what I think ended up being the very last Book Expo America.
Oh yeah.
It got killed by the pandemic.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, Book Expo America was my favorite. But I went to a breakfast where they were talking about, it was like a book buzz breakfast. And several of the publisher reps who were talking about hot books would talk about how like they had tried to get this book that the other publisher got. And it was like a lot of like, oh, I wanted that one and you stole it out from under me, but it was so great, everyone should read it. And I really enjoyed that like collegial competition kind of aspect of it. It was nice.
That is nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hot tip for if you're going to be on a panel like that, email someone else on the panel and be like, I'll talk about one of your books if you talk about one of mine.
Yeah.
Just
it definitely gives people more confidence. They're like, oh.
Yeah.
You know, they're not just hyping up the book that their job relies on, you know.
Yep. Must be pretty good if they're willing to go that way.
Yeah.
And if they did that to me and I worked for a publisher, I'd say yes.
Yeah.
And then I would double down and talk about the same book again from me, not their book.
Be like, I'm going to talk about it too because it was so great.
And that was the last time I was invited to a panel.
Yeah. I do love those though. Those kind of conferences. I will be going to StokerCon this year.
Ooh, cool.
So yeah, I'll be hearing about a lot of horror this summer, and I will come back and share some of it.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
We'll have to do like a StokerCon post-conference, a StokerCon special episode of this podcast.
Okay, I was just making sure you weren't having a stroke.
I was trying to say StokerCon. I don't know.
A StokerCon spectacular?
Yeah.
Let's call it that.
Okay.
Okay.
Stoketacular.
Okay.
I'm not going to be satisfied until I mash it into one word.
All right.
The StokerCon-tacular. Okay.
Okay. All right. And do you need me to say what I want you to
No,
talk
I
about?
can just talk about Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon.
Let's get into it. The moment we've all been waiting for.
I think everyone's waited long enough.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
I read
I'm
Ice
ready.
Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon.
Huzzah!
If you have no idea what Ice Planet Barbarians is, it's kind of been tearing up like Book Talk, you know, and other online things because it came out like, I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that.
It's been a little while, yeah. It's like not new, but it's not old.
Yeah. And I think it came out and, you know, it probably did fine.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
but
yeah,
it's had
it did all right. Ruby Dixon is a known name for romance readers.
And then in the last year, maybe 2 years, it had a resurgence.
Yes, a
It
whole
was like
new
a
audience discovered it.
rediscovery, yeah. And I guess people must have discovered it because it's a romance. It's called Ice Planet Barbarians.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the cover is pretty clearly a human woman and a guy who, the best I can describe, looks like a guy from Avatar.
Yeah,
one of
that
those,
works.
the Na'vi. He's like a tall blue, I guess, barbarian-y guy.
Yeah.
And he has a tail.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think this has fallen into the category of every so often a romance writer or sometimes like an erotica writer kind of moves into the mainstream for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody picks up on it and whatever. There's a guy named Chuck Tingle who's
Chuck.
done a lot of really, really bizarre erotic fiction.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of a title of one that I can say on here.
Yeah, I don't know that there are many.
I'll do. I read one called Space Raptor Bleep Invasion about a man who carries on a romance with a velociraptor in space.
All right, I've got my laptop, so I'm going to find one that we can use. Here we go. Not pounded by anything. 6 platonic tales of non-sexual encounters.
There you go. Perfect.
But that gives you an idea of his formula, I think.
And then he's got these covers that are really, really bizarre.
Yes.
You know, they're kind of like bad Photoshops, but kind of not bad. So
They're
anyway,
so bad they're good.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're bad, but they're perfect
Yeah.
for what's happening.
Yeah. They're everything you want.
Yeah. So he pops up every so often because it's like when someone discovers The Onion, and then they're
Right.
like, "Look at this headline! This is hilarious!" And then someone discovers Chuck Tingle, and they're like, "Oh, look at this!"
It's like if the weird part of romance were like a pit trap in the forest,
Yeah.
and every once in a while some unsuspecting person falls into it and is like, what is going on?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of what this felt like. You're just
Yeah.
walking through the forest of normal books,
Yep.
and then you're falling, and then you're in this world of
And you're like,
things that
how did I get
I
here?
don't understand. Yeah. Okay, so just for a little summary, Ice Planet Barbarians starts by introducing us to our hero, Georgie. She's a fairly average woman, maybe in her late 20s, early 30s, something like that. Part of what I liked about this book is I counted, and 215 words into the book, not 215 pages, not paragraphs, words into the book, we are in space. So we didn't mess around. Like, I kind of thought when I started this, it was like, okay, we're going to have to like meet her goofball roommate, and it'll be like, oh, Georgie goes on a Tinder date that doesn't work out. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
like all this establishing
We have to watch sad single Georgie drink wine while she
Yes.
watches The Bachelor on the couch.
Nope. She's like going home from work, and it was like an average work day, and it's a Tuesday night or something. So she basically says something like, on Tuesday nights, I go home, I microwave dinner, I watch TV, and go to bed. The next thing we know, she wakes up on a spaceship. So what happened is Georgie, along with like 11 other women, has been kidnapped, abducted,
Yeah.
alien abducted. And they, through various reasons and means, they discover that they are being taken to this alien world to basically be breeding stock.
Yes.
Or presumably for these aliens. I guess that's not totally sure. But
Yeah. Maybe they're being sold. We
Yeah.
don't know. It's not actually really that important. We just know
No.
bad things ahead.
Because the important thing is then what happens is also a little unclear. For some reason, the spaceship and the aliens have to dump their human cargo. My interpretation of what happened is they must have been getting pulled over by some kind of a space cop.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like, if you had a baggie of illicit material that you threw out the window
Right.
as the cop is pulling you over.
Right.
So they're like, well, as long as we don't get caught, we'll be fine.
We're just headed home, officer.
Yeah. Which I was like, they're not going to notice you dumping like an entire cargo container off onto a planet. Like, whatever. It's fine.
It doesn't matter.
It
That's not
does
why
not
we're
matter.
here.
No. So all the women are left in this. I pictured like a cargo container,
Mm-hmm.
or cargo ship, whatever. They're just left on this planet. There's none of the aliens are with them. They're just kind of on their own. And so some of them are injured, some of them are whatever. And so Georgie goes off in search of something.
Right.
Supplies, whatever. Quickly becomes apparent they're on an alien world because there's like two suns. And it's a planet she calls Not Hoth because it's like an ice planet. The
Ice
titular
planet.
ice planet is very much there. She encounters some creatures and then pretty quickly meets Vectal, who is the titular ice planet barbarian.
Right.
Who I think is pretty close to like an Avatar guy.
Very tall.
Very tall, has a tail,
Yeah.
Blue,
Blue.
yeah. Probably that was a very important detail.
Right.
too.
Right.
He's a very blue guy.
Yep.
They meet. They almost immediately have a spicy encounter based on a sort of misunderstanding of cultures.
Yep. Yep.
But, somehow the alien and human anatomy is different but lines up in important ways.
Convenient for the genre.
Yes. Yeah. It's not just like, oh, this is not remotely the same,
Slot A and tab B are completely incompatible.
Yeah. Yep. It's just like, tab A is tab A sharp. So it's fine. Um, so then he sort of bonds to her for, I don't know. I don't know if I should explain because.
We're still at the beginning. I think you're good.
Okay. He has something that he calls a quee. And, okay, so the narration goes back and forth between the two people.
Right.
Georgie
they can't communicate at all.
Right. They don't speak the same language. Georgie even kind of alludes to, like, Vectal's language being, like, purring sounds and stuff that I don't think she can even make. So we'll have a chapter narrated by Georgie and then a chapter narrated by Vectal, so we know what both of them are thinking. Mm-hmm. Vectal has something he calls a quee. And a quee is not explained super early in the book, but what it is a alien parasite that you put in your body, which then helps you survive the harsh climate of the ice planet. Mm-hmm. But also, when you meet the person that you're destined to be with, it resonates.
Yes.
Which I just assumed meant vibrates or something.
Yeah, I think
don't
that's safe to assume.
Emotionally and physically vibrates in some way. So when he met Georgie, his quee resonated, so he knew that they were destined to be together.
Right.
Thanks to an alien worm. A glowing alien worm
yes.
that he put inside his neck at some point in his life. Which is pretty amazing.
Yep.
It did make me wonder when I was reading, because I was like, online dating is a nightmare. Mm-hmm. And I was like, as weird as it sounds on first reading, and as gross as it sounds to like, okay, cut a hole in your neck and let a worm go in there. I don't know that if someone was like, but if you do it, when you meet the person you're supposed to be with, it will resonate and you'll both know.
Yeah, you'll be certain.
I think people would do it.
Yeah.
I think people would go for it.
I mean,
why not?
The fantasy of it is awfully tempting, isn't it? You won't waste time with someone.
No.
You won't, that you'll be compatible.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just, I didn't expect it to be as weird as it was.
Oh, that's the weird part of romance.
Yeah.
For sure. It gets weirder.
Yes.
There are parts of romance where the hero is a giant spider.
Yes.
So it gets weirder.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, because the Ice Planet Barbarian thing is weird, but you're like, I mean, he pretty much sounds like he looks like a Earth dude.
Right.
But tall and blue. Yeah. And also I was like, well, I guess the quee helps them stay warm and stuff too, which I was like, well, that seems like it'd be appealing to a lot of people of
who get cold.
I'll never be cold again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. I could see some of the fantasy work in here. Okay, I liked it more than I thought I was going to.
Yeah. How much did you think you were going to like it? What were your expectations going in?
I mean, out of 5, I thought it'd probably be a 1.
Okay.
Because I thought, the only other romance I read was License to Love, which was really fun to summarize, but wasn't fun to read. It was so long, and it was so slow, and there's just all this excessive nonsense and whatever. This book really clips along.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of wasted space in the book. It also kind of just keeps ratcheting up the weirdness of it.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking that they would get together and that would basically be the end of it. Mm-hmm. But that's not the end of the weirdness, and it's not really even the end of the story. Ice Planet Barbarians is the first in a series, apparently, because there's more things that happen. It ends in a satisfactory way, but it's not the end of the saga. Right. So I guess I thought it was going to be a lot more padded and expanded and whatever, but it's pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's a quick read. Also, Georgie is fairly entertaining. I was thinking of she feels like the sort of fun main character from a rom-com, who you're like, okay, this person is someone I don't mind spending time with in that book way. She was better written than I thought she was going to be.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I mean that in terms of like, oh, she was a super deep whatever and da 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 da. I just mean like, I didn't dread going back to the book
Right.
like I thought I would. I was like, all right, I'll get in some reading time and whatever. And then I thought I'd put it down and be like, ugh, like it's an obligation.
Right.
Wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
I guess, as far as other people reading it, there is a weird element to it
Yeah.
of like lack of consent
Yeah.
going on. And I have seen a lot of people complain about that.
Yeah.
And I can sort of understand that.
We had some very nerdy, like, literary criticism emails between the two of us this week, which I very much enjoyed.
I will have to admit to grossly overthinking Ice Planet Barbarians. Talking about like ludonarrative dissonance or something like. And then I'm like, and then when he got the electric worm in him, and
Yeah.
he did, but okay, if any sort of lack of consent is like a problem thing for
Yeah.
you in a fictional narrative, don't read this book.
Right.
It's not
It
going
is
to
in
be
there.
it's not going to be fun for you.
Yeah.
But if that's something that you can sort of like get past, it mostly happens like pretty early on in the book,
Yeah.
and then it makes sense in the narrative way, which is like that's the hardest thing to explain, is because when you're in this book, you're in this sort of swirling world
Yeah.
where things that shouldn't make sense make sense.
Yeah.
And like things do have an explanation, and I know what's going on,
Yeah.
and
Well, and I think it's important to say, like, you understand Vectel's motivation in that moment,
Yes.
and there's no malice
Right.
involved, and also to acknowledge that Georgie has a good time.
yes. Yes, she does. She has such a good time that she sort of temporarily forgets her mission to save the other kidnapped women who are like dying in the snow.
Right.
Because she's like, this is pretty amazing. She was out trying to find food or find something, and she found this instead. And I did feel like there was maybe an element too of like in this book where she's like, okay, we're on an alien planet. 2 days ago, I didn't think aliens were real.
Right.
I think at some point in the book, she kind of gives up on like ever returning to Earth or having a normal life,
Yeah.
seemingly, at least emotionally. And so it almost felt to me a little bit like a version of, I'm pretty sure I'm going to die. I'm going to go out this way.
Right.
Like, I'm going to go out doing this, and, that's what it's going to be. And I was kind of like, okay.
Fair enough.
I don't feel I'm in a position to judge your choices right now. You are the one trapped on the ice planet.
It's true.
Kidnapped against your will, put in this situation that, is not your fault.
Yeah.
So,
Don't judge till you've walked a mile in her barbarian fur boots.
yeah. Yeah, and we talked a little bit about, I guess there's a romance trope called fated mates.
Yep.
Where it's something to do, well, you could probably explain it better than I could, but
I mean, it's in the name, Fated Mates.
yeah. And it's like people who are meant to be together.
Yeah.
And then you
Even
were kind of
destined,
saying
I'd say.
often one person is like more aware of the fated
Right.
status.
Well, that's a lot of times where the conflict is coming from.
Yeah.
Is that one person knows, and is certain that this is their fated mate. The other either doesn't know or is unwilling to accept it.
Yeah. Yeah, and like Georgie, I think is like, she's clearly willing to accept Vectal as her mate while they're on the ice planet.
Right.
And then at some point, I think she's like thinking maybe they'll be able to leave the ice planet. And so I think she's a little torn because she's like, well, I don't want to like stay on the ice planet if that's what I have to do to stay with him. I think that's some of her conflict is like, do I want to give up my life and live the barbarian life in a cave to stay with Vectal? I'm not sure.
Do I want my very own alien parasite?
Yeah. Is that something I'm willing to do? But then, I don't know, she's just a fun person to listen to, and the way she goes about something, sometimes she explains something, and I'm like, okay, that doesn't I'm not buying it. But you tell yourself whatever you got to tell yourself, Georgie. But other times I'm like, I guess it makes sense. As much as anything in this book makes sense. Maybe that's part of it too. It's hard to argue with anything that happens in the book because you're like, well, we are in the Ice Planet Barbarian world now. So for me to say like that doesn't seem realistic is going to be difficult.
Yeah, it's definitely asking a suspension of disbelief from you.
Yeah.
If you can't give that, it's probably not the book for you.
Yes. I will say, too, I read just a tiny bit about Ruby Dixon and about her books, and it made me like her and the book more.
Yeah.
Because she had one quote that was basically like, you know, I don't think every book has to be like a life-changing experience. Sometimes it can just be fun.
Yeah.
And that's what she's doing. And I was like, I think you succeeded in that. And
Yeah.
like, I agree with her too. I think we put too much emphasis on books being like fixing the ills of society or informing us about something we didn't know about. And I'm like, sometimes it can just be fun.
Yeah.
It can just be entertaining. It can just be interesting. You know, it can just be weird.
Yeah.
And I think that's great.
Yeah, I agree. I was telling you I read a Ruby Dixon myself. I read her new book called The Half Orcs Maiden Bribe.
Yeah.
And it was great.
Yeah.
It was, for lack of a better word, it was very sweet. Like, it was this very sweet love story.
Yeah.
You've got this, like, half-orc lord of a castle, and he is determined to gain respectability by marrying a human. And there's this tall, gangly, like, she's too much of everything. She's too big, she's too tall, she's too, you know, freckled, she's too everything. And so her father, like, basically sells her to this half-orc. And then it turns out that they're actually very well suited to each other, and they like each other quite a lot. And it's great.
Little Beauty and the Beast vibe going. Little Beauty and the Beast vibe going.
That's a pretty, I mean, I'm sure you're not surprised to hear that is a pretty common trope in romance, Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, and I mean, this book has its, like, sweet side to it. And, like, I think it's, well, this is hard for me to say because I'm not really versed in the romance world, and I'm a man. And so...
Men are welcome. They just don't tend to wander into our neck of the woods.
Well, it feels like the fantasy aspect of it, there's one fantasy aspect of it because Vectal treats Georgie like a queen. You know, like the most important person, the most important thing in his life, and, you know, is willing to do whatever. And just his number one priority is her happiness. And so I think there's a fantasy element there that I understand, and it's sweet in its way. And then I think the sort of fated mates idea is kind of a sweet idea because it's like, oh, it takes a lot of the like questioning out of dating. And like, I guess if fated mates was a real thing, divorce would not exist, right? Because you'd be like, this is the person, like, that's it,
this is it.
So you wouldn't ever have to question that, or there'd never be a question in a relationship of like, should we throw it in the towel? Should we work on this? Like, what should we do? And I think that simplification of that part of the relationship
it's appealing.
Is very appealing. Yeah. I was like, oh, this makes sense.
Yeah.
Just in case my partner is listening to this.
Hello.
Hi. And I'm not doubting our relationship. I'm not going to ask you to put a worm in your neck. Don't worry.
Yeah, if that is ever something that's on the table, I encourage you to seek help.
Yeah, I will.
Before inserting worms into your neck.
That won't be in my top 5
I mean, I would like you to say that it's not in your list of options at all.
I know you'd like that, but, you know, who knows what the future holds.
Oh, no. Don't be afraid to call me if it gets weird. I'll help you get out.
You're talking to her right now?
Yes, I am.
Okay. If I come home with worms and a scalpel, just run.
You've got my number.
Yeah. So anyway, Ice Planet Barbarians was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun. I think I went into it expecting to just hate it and think it was, and I was kind of reading it just because I thought it would be weird, and
Well,
it
you've read
was.
other like things you didn't enjoy but that are fun to review and talk about.
Yes,
So I imagine that's probably what you were.
I was.
Yeah.
And honestly, I came out of it a little bit at a loss in those terms because I was like, this is like a completely competent book
Yeah.
and like it's enjoyable.
Does what it
And
sets out to do.
yeah. And maybe the way I could best talk about it is to say it's like, if you've ever seen a movie that you is clearly not for you, like maybe a kid's movie or something
Right.
that you're like, I'm not really the intended audience for this, but you watch it and you're like, it's pretty good, and I totally see the appeal, and I think that everything this book was trying to do, it accomplished. I think it had its set out goals, and it accomplished all of them
Yeah.
with aplomb and with very little wasted time, which I completely appreciated. It's the anti-Ulysses.
Yeah.
So,
We need more of those.
yeah. So I give an enthusiastic thumbs up to Ice Planet Barbarians.
Yay!
And, maybe the best endorsement I can give of it is that, like, I read License to Love and didn't read another romance for like 5 years.
Yeah.
And I read this one and was like, okay, I'd be much more apt to try another one now
Yeah.
than I was after reading that first one.
Yeah.
So it was not repellent to me at all.
All right.
Boom.
I'll take it. Because people who are listening to this, they may not realize what kind of a reader you are, but I've known you for a while and I know what kind of a reader you are. And so when you say like that this book isn't for you or it wasn't repellent, like I realize that this is not you saying like, it's I expected it to be a steaming pile of garbage and it was only a pile of garbage. It didn't steam at all.
No. Yeah.
That actually you're just like, this is very, very different from the type of reading you enjoy generally.
Yes.
Which is part of why we do this show.
Right.
Is because that is very similar to the type of reading I do enjoy.
Right.
And you enjoy something different. And so us talking about what we enjoy covers a large span of types of books.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like if somebody who watches nothing but Fast and Furious, and then they were like, I saw Mean Girls.
Right.
I don't think that was really meant for me, but it was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
I would watch something like that again. I'd give that another shot. Yeah, and yes. I'm not saying it's not good
Yeah.
at all, and I wouldn't want someone to walk away. It is just very much outside my normal, self-guided tour of the world of books.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I would like to, applaud you for both being willing to try something so completely outside your familiar territory and for being open-minded enough to like take it at its face and like not trash talk it because it is ridiculous. Like no one's saying it's not ridiculous.
Right.
It's bananas.
Yes.
But that is why we love it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of that's what's good about it. It's like it knows what it is, and it's not trying to not be bizarre.
Yeah.
It's leaned into the bizarre,
Yeah.
and it's leaned into that the voicey aspect of it and all this stuff, and that's
Upping the ante. It's all
Yeah.
about upping the ante.
and that's what makes it work. And but it is also like not just weird for the sake of being
Right.
weird. It's not like gratuitously weird where you're
Yeah, it
like,
hits all the right beats of a romance.
yeah.
All of that stuff.
Yeah, because stuff that's just weird for the sake of being weird, the problem with it is if you don't find it particularly weird, there's nothing.
Right.
It's got nothing else. And this does
Right.
have other stuff to it that makes it appealing.
Right.
So even if you don't find it that weird, it's still pretty appealing,
Right.
I think. But yeah, it it is pretty far outside my normal
It
reading
is.
purview.
I mean, this is relatively deep into the weird part of romance.
Yeah.
Like I was saying, there are weirder parts of romance,
Yep.
but I do think that this is an area of romance that most people don't get to accidentally.
Yeah.
Like, and if you do, you get very confused.
Yeah, and I think that's what's good about it too is like, and why I would recommend it to someone else, because I'm like, if you're semi-curious,
Yeah.
and if you're just semi-curious about romance in general,
Yeah.
this is like an easy point of entry,
Right.
because it's like it's got other things going on,
Hmm.
it's got weirdness, it's got romance,
Right.
it's got a lot of things, and it is kind of interesting to talk about,
Yeah.
and like. I put up a part of a review on Goodreads and have gotten feedback on it, which I don't normally get for everything
Yeah.
because so many people have read it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people have read it. But I do think it's a good point of entry into
Hmm.
the romance world,
Yeah.
especially for people like me who are like, I'm not going to be typical interested in everything.
Right.
So if you need a little extra reason to dive in,
Yeah.
the bizarreness of the book
Yeah.
will carry you through.
Well, and if this were a different podcast, we could go on for a lot more time about what I think this book is doing, as far as, because, while it is essentially, like, at its core, it is a fun, over the top, banana pants romance novel. And that's really why it exists.
Yeah.
But I do think that because it is a romance novel, it's doing some work that romance novels do around, human emotion and gender roles and relationships. And if this were a different podcast, we'd get into it. But we're not. I'm not gonna take us down that road because I don't think that's why most people are here.
Well, fair enough. Well, I guess that if you're listening to this and you want to go down that road,
Yeah.
we could do it.
Yeah. Let us know.
I mean, you could do it. I'm gonna just be. It'll be
No,
like one of those true crime
our
podcasts.
nerdy emails. You had things to add that I thought were insightful.
I
Yeah.
guess so.
Yeah.
I just I think it's weird because it's just such a difficult book to. It's so easy to undervalue it.
Yeah.
But it's also maybe easy to go a little too far
Yeah.
into looking into it, and that kind of kills the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like you got to be somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But
Well, I guess here's my question for you, Peter.
yeah,
Is this something we can expect more of in the future, like our annual Peter's Bonkers Romance pick?
I feel like I could at least do an annual.
Yeah?
I think so. Especially like if I spend some time looking into it and find one that's not too long
Yeah.
and is like weird enough.
I mean, at the very least, I know that we have a bunch of Ruby Dixon's audiobooks in Hoopla.
That's true.
So even if, because the library has purchased Ice Planet Barbarians in print,
Yeah.
which is not something I ever would have expected.
Right.
But when Book Talk got a hold of it, it blew up, and we have it now. So you can read them in print, which is great.
Yeah.
But we have her other series, some of her other series, in audio on Hoopla.
Okay.
So you have some options. I am also happy to offer any guidance you might like finding some banana pants. I went to a romance convention once, and I went to a panel called Banana Pants Romance. It was great. I have a very long list.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's where my passions would lie.
Yeah.
Because I have read one other romance, sort of, Redeeming Love
Oh,
by
yeah.
Francine Rivers, which is like a faith-based romance
Yeah.
that I had problems with and didn't
Yeah.
enjoy. But a lot of people do. And
Yeah. That
that's
one
your
was
jam.
also very long,
Oh man, it's so long.
which I think is part of what made it even more not for you,
Yeah. That was
honestly.
for a brief period I was a member of a televised book club that
Yeah.
was like part of a news show. And I think I went 4 or 5 times and my legs appeared once. And nothing else.
Your claim to fame.
Yeah.
See, look for old PBS, Denver Book Club, and keep an eye out for Peter's legs.
Yeah. I'm wearing Converse shoes and black pants. So if you see a nice set of gams off to the side,
That's got to be him.
that's me. That's what I figured out what they had me there for. Just
Those
wanted
legs.
to look at my calves.
Yeah.
Wasn't
Those-
even my whole leg. It was just probably below the knee.
Well, there was a time in history where men wore tights to show off the shape of their legs, so maybe you missed your time.
Maybe I did.
Yeah.
I don't know. This would take some investigation. I'd have to put on some tights and see what what I was looking at.
Well, if you decide to pursue that area of thought, then I'd be interested in your conclusions.
Okay. Whether or not I would have
Yeah.
been successful in the
If you would have
old
been the
days.
Beau Brummel of your age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Beau Brummel.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right.
All right.
Well.
So let's go over our books, shall we?
Yes, we should.
I'll go first since I started. So the first book I brought was Ghosted, Volume 1, Haunted Heist by Joshua Williamson. We talked about that one. I also brought Isla to Island by Alexis Castellanos. This one is largely wordless, so it's a great one for a bunch of ages, too, because you don't have a lot of actual reading to do, but you get a nice, meaningful, kind of complex story about Operation Peter Pan, which is when a bunch of Cuban children were sent to the U.S. to get them out of potential harm's way with the Cuban Revolution. And it's about her being in New York and feeling very out of place and not knowing the language and not knowing the culture and a very different climate and all of those things. So it's about, feeling like you don't belong. It's beautifully done. Then we have Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe, which is a Persephone Hades story with all of the other gods of the Greek pantheon. You get Artemis and Demeter and Apollo and Hermes and all of that stuff. So if you like the Greek pantheon, that's here. It's also a romance. There is some consent stuff here that is not as charming as Ice Planet Barbarians. So
But
I
what
believe that
is,
the book
really?
opens with some content warnings. So I would take a look at those if that's something that is likely to bother you, because there is some stuff in here. It deals with it seriously, but if you find that difficult to read about, then you would want to know that it's there. So be aware that it's there. Then finally we had What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher, which will be out on July 12th, but you can get your name on the hold list now. And I encourage you to do it if you like a good creepy gothic story, especially like those big looming creepy houses. That is what you'll get here. So, yeah, that's my 4.
All right. I had Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. I think we probably covered it.
I think so.
The 90s by Chuck Klosterman. That's about the 90s. The 90s by Chuck Klosterman, or Chuck Klosterman Does the 90s, as I like to think of it. Steeple by John Allison. That's a comic book series about a woman who goes to work for this Catholic church and then finds out the priest is like a monster fighter man. And then there's also like a, satanic church in the town who has a sort of similar young woman counterpart working at their church, and actually these two end up swapping churches.
Oh.
And yeah, it's mostly comedic, I'd
Okay.
say.
That sounds interesting.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's there's a book called Bad Machinery. That's probably his more famous one. Giant Days.
Oh, I think I've read Giant Days.
Yeah. So if you think about Giant Days, throw in some monsters and
right.
swapping stuff. The religious thing's not like a big element.
Okay.
And then The Cape by Joe Hill, which is about a guy who discovers a cape that lets him fly, and then he uses that to do horrible things to people.
Oh, all right.
Yeah. It kind of reminded me of the hypothetical question of would you rather be able to fly or turn invisible?
Yeah.
Because he can fly, but he's not like super strong. He doesn't have other superpowers, just flight. So, he's trying to do some things at some points that are difficult for him because he's like, oh, yeah, I guess I'm not like a superhero.
Right.
I can just fly. So he has a superpower that he uses exclusively for evil.
All right. I mean, Joe Hill is Stephen King's son, so.
Yes.
You know.
And he did a Basket Full of Heads, which I think you talked about on here before.
Yep.
So it's got a similar vibe to that.
I think he has a new miniseries coming out based on, is it The Firefighter?
Oh, maybe.
I forget the title of the book. He wrote this big epic dystopia.
Yeah.
And I think it's being adapted somehow.
For the Fireman, maybe?
Fireman, yeah, I think that's probably it.
Yeah, and he did Lock and Key, of course,
He did.
which is probably his biggest
Yeah.
comic book. The Cape is a good one, I think, especially if you're not the biggest comic book reader. I think some people like me who've read a ton of comics will probably find it a little bit like, I kind of seen something like this before.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not maxing out like your Hoopla and Overdrive checkouts all the time,
Like
reading
someone I could
comics,
name.
like just some goofball who would do that, who's carefully scheduling his Hoopla checkouts and checking to get the editions with the largest number of
I was
pages.
going to say, have strategies for finding omnibus editions rather than individual issues.
Yes, yeah, and has strong opinions about when they offer the individual issues, when those larger editions are available, and I'm like, take that off. I don't want to get that. But if you're that person, you may end up, it's still good, but you might just be like, it feels like something maybe I've seen before.
All right.
But if you're not like that person, so you're not me, you'll probably be like, it's good. It's worth your time, and it's
All right.
interesting, and the art's really good.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
We did it.
That's it. That's our titles.
Do you have a joke to take us out?
I mean, I could, but I closed out my joke document, so
Oh, man.
I can't spoil you with that many jokes.
That's true.
Yeah.
What would I do?
You would just, like, not be able to go on
I'd have
without jokes on the daily.
I'll wake up tomorrow and have a tummy ache from laughing too much.
Yeah.
I'll be like, I laughed twice as much as I was supposed to this
I'll
month.
get early morning texts from you saying, I can't start work until you tell me a joke. And I'm not here for that.
Got more important things to do. All right. We'll see you next time.
Bye.